What kind of economic systems are best at allowing us to exercise the fact that we are created in the image and likeness of God?
Now keep in mind that if you take tiny steps towards any goal, it's just a matter of when you're going to reach it.
Scarcity is the first lesson of economics. Now, the first lesson of politics is to forget the first lesson of economics.
If you don't provide real, actual value to people in exchange for the money that you're asking for in return, you will lose over time.
We can see the economy as a social web that God has created for people to serve each other with their work.
We have the Word of God that provides for us a foundation for knowledge, for truth, for beauty, for goodness, for dignity and value in human beings. We have the Word of God that provides for us things like this. Ready? Thou shalt not steal.
Ethics on the legitimacy of wealth and entrepreneurship individually. Secondly, postmillennial eschatology, that is, the kingdom of God expands across the earth before Jesus comes back in final judgment. And the link to get those two together is the idea of the pursuit of self-interest leading to widespread economic growth and social transformation.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Christ in Capital, a show that wants to encourage you to love God, love neighbor, and build something. I'm the host, Dustin Johnson, and this is going to be a fun episode, I think. Back with me again is Nathan Johnson. What's up, Nathan? How are you doing?
Hey, Dustin. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back on Christ in Capital.
Yes, I'm very excited. I think this discussion that we're going to have today is, it's kind of been in the back of my mind for a long time because it's a foundational economic discussion. It's basically about two economic principles that seem to be perpetually at war with one another. And what we're going to be talking about is equal opportunity versus equal outcome. Like I said, two ideas that I'm not sure if I can necessarily say that it falls along political party lines. I think largely that might be true, but let's just kind of define it. What are we talking about when we talk about equal opportunity versus equal outcome? What's the idea? What are we talking about?
Yeah, so it might be helpful to look at it historically. For a lot of American history and Western history and probably world history, equality of opportunity was not much of a thing. So what that meant was certain people were slaves, and they obviously did not have the same economic or social opportunities that people who were freedmen would have. So like in the United States, if you were born black, you did not have access to the opportunities that people had who were white. If you were born black before 1865, then you were most likely going to be enslaved. But even after emancipation, with Jim Crow and with kind of systemic racism throughout the U.S., you wouldn't have equal access to schools, you wouldn't have equal access to jobs. There was not an opportunity that a white person had that would necessarily a black person would also have. Mm-hmm. The same thing between men and women. So for a lot of American history, women didn't have the same opportunities, social or economic opportunities that men did. Mm-hmm. Women couldn't vote, or women couldn't get the same sorts of jobs, things like that. So for a lot of American history, the discussion of equality was about equal opportunity. It was about, we need to make sure that everyone, no matter their race, no matter their gender, has the same opportunity to pursue the same social and economic ends. Yeah. So we want to make sure that someone isn't refused a job simply because they're black or because they're a woman, right? Yes. That's equal opportunity. Everybody has the same opportunities to pursue whatever ends they want to pursue, and the system is not going to stop them because of something like their race or their gender.
Yes.
Now, equal outcome is very different. And that's really not something that's been largely popular or even discussed until the last couple decades, where essentially, okay, now we do have equality of opportunity for the most part. Things are mostly equal in terms of what anyone can pursue. The laws are set in place that we can't discriminate. But the reality is, people still don't end up in the same place economically. They don't end up in the same place socially. And so now the idea is, well, maybe we need equality of outcome. And that's the idea that everybody ends up the same. Everybody gets the same at the end of the game.
Yes.
So because you're looking at it and you go, okay, great. So you're Black. That doesn't mean that you're going to be kept from certain jobs. But what if you're born poor? Well, then you don't have the same kind of opportunities. You can't go to private school, or you don't have connections, or whatever. You can't get a leg up. But then there are other people who are born in wealthy families, go to private schools, have a lot of connections, and then they go to Harvard, or they get a law degree, or whatever. Right. So the idea is, well, that doesn't seem fair, even if the laws aren't unfair. So maybe we need to give some people a leg up so that everybody can end up the same place, because not everybody starts at the same place.
Right. Yes, and I think that idea of fairness is kind of a key component of this whole discussion. So, and let me just kind of like give another. I'm going to put different words on this real quick. When we talk about equal opportunity, I think we can largely equate that with our concept of equality. When we talk about equal outcome, we're talking about equity. Okay. And I think a large portion of society are not really going to make a sharp distinction between those two, because we use them synonymously, just in popular conversation, right? We just, we'll use equity where we mean equality, but there is a distinction between those words. And I think a lot of people who are in our higher ups in the in government and in places of influence know this, and they use it strategically to kind of, I don't know if I really call it a dog whistle, but they will use it, and they know there's a distinction between the two. And I'm going to play this video real quick. This is Kamala Harris's video. She knows this. She knows there's a difference between the two. And I think it would behoove us? Yes. I don't know if that might be the first time I've ever used that word. Anyways, so she knows this, and she, I think it would do us well if we recognized the distinction and started using them. Everyone started using them the same way, because I think we're just going to get confused if some people are thinking equity means equality and some people are using it as this new equal outcome kind of concept. So let me play this real quick. And then we can just kind of talk about it before we dive into the discussion, the kind of details.
So there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equality suggests, everyone should get the same amount. The problem with that, not everybody's starting out from the same place. So if we're all getting the same amount, but you started out back there and I started out over here, we could get the same amount, but you're still going to be that far back behind me. It's about giving people the resources and the support they need so that everyone can be on equal footing and then compete on equal footing. Equitable treatment means we all end up at the same place.
Equitable treatment means we all end up at the same place. My first thought about that was, I'm super excited to be vice president along with Kamala Harris if she gets in. If we're all going to end up at the same place, I am going to be vice president.
Yeah.
Super stoked. No, but seriously. So for those, Nathan, for the listeners, Nathan couldn't hear that. This is the way that things are set up. He couldn't really hear the video. But the idea in the video was that there was two people. Both were standing facing a mountain. one was up on higher ground and one was on lower ground. Equal amounts of rope were thrown down to both of them. The guy who was on the lower ground couldn't reach the rope, and the guy who was on the higher ground could reach the rope, and therefore he could climb the mountain. And at the end, the guy at the top reaches down and helps the guy at the bottom, and they all both reach the top of the mountain. So they both end up at the same place. So when we talk about equal outcome, think equity. That's the word that people are going to use, is equity. And so, Nathan, I just wanted to get your thoughts real quick. What do you have? What's your first kind of knee-jerk reaction to that video?
Oof. Well, unfortunately, I've got several knee-jerk reactions, but I think the first is just, and this is something that's frustrated me, not simply about the video, but the rhetoric in general from progressives about the idea of equity, is that no one's actually defined what that end goal is supposed to be.
Right.
It's just like, oh, we want everyone to end up in the same place. Okay, well, where is that place? How do you define it? What is it? And no one can, because the reality is it's going to be different for different people.
I think that is strategic for politicians, though, right? To not define it, because you leave it open-ended and you can use it to justify lots of different things. It's just a really convenient tool to justify the decisions that you make.
Right.
Yeah, you don't lock yourself into a specific definition. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, right. No, exactly. I think you're exactly right. I mean, what is it? Is it we want everyone to be able to make X amount of money? Is it we want everybody to be able to go to this college or have these sort of resources or have this sort of social status or whatever? And obviously, clearly, all of the politicians who are championing this don't really want what they've gotten to be given to other people. So, for example, Kamala Harris, law student, I think she went to Stanford, obviously had tremendous opportunity to rise to the level of now vice president-elect. If everyone could just get into Stanford Law School, for example, then her degree would be meaningless.
Right. And we're getting to supply and demand.
Yeah, exactly. If everyone could have access to the elite social sphere, it's not elite.
Yeah, there's
anymore,
no elite.
Right. Exactly. So clearly, these politicians don't actually want people to get what they have. So then you ask the question, well, where do they want all of these people to end up? And it just gets vague. And I think you're right. It becomes a very easy and powerful political tool for them to justify free college or free healthcare or free whatever, fill in the blank, under this kind of brand of equity and equal outcomes. But nobody actually thinks that we're going to be able to produce equal outcomes because nobody knows what those outcomes are.
Right. I think that's a good point to make. Even the people that you would suspect would be behind this idea of equal outcomes, if you were to sit down with them, like let's say you had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Bernie Sanders, and you sat down with them and you said, and you kind of put their feet to the fire and say, okay, we want everyone to have equal outcomes. Like if you push them on that, I don't think they would I think they would back down. I think they would say, no, I understand it's not realistic. And we're not pushing for strict equal outcomes across the board. I'm pretty sure that they would be generous enough to concede that that's not what they're after. But the underlying kind of principle is just so compelling to politicians because they can use it for all these different emotional. Maybe I am gonna say manipulation, but that's the idea. Is that this idea of equal outcomes is very potent and it gets people on board with political ideas, and it's just it's disastrous. We've seen it throughout history. We saw it with we've talked about the kulaks in the past.
Right.
Equal, Stalin wanted the outcomes of society, the outcomes of income, if you want
Yes.
to be distributed equally across society, and that resulted in disaster, and that's just how it works.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to throw something out there. When we talk about equal opportunity versus equal outcome, I don't think either is really achievable. And I want to make a distinction because I think equal opportunity is a good, virtuous goal, right? Especially when you're talking about the law,
Right.
the
Exactly.
systems. We want to pursue equal opportunity in the eyes of the law, and it's worth noting that the law should be a negative kind of thing, a negative. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but the law doesn't act proactively. It holds
It
it holds
restrains.
back.
Yeah.
And so it's like a negative. It's a negative thing. So we want equality of opportunity in the eyes of the law. No one should be hindered from something that isn't just straight across the board equal for everyone.
Yeah.
Right? You shall not kill. You shall not steal. You shall not, move your neighbor's boundary mark. Just kind of biblical principles. Everyone. It applies to everyone. Don't do it. But the law should never be something that says, okay, for you over here, you get to do this, but this person over here doesn't get, can't do this, and it's just straight across the board. And I think we can see in the idea of equal opportunity, the idea of the image of God kind of embedded there, or like the idea of the equal value of human beings there, because I think that's the foundation of the law. So the bulk of this discussion is not going to be on equal opportunity, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, that we're talking about opportunity in the eyes of the law, and that is founded on the idea of the image of God in every human being.
Right.
Yep.
Now, so I think this gets into one of the other knee-jerk reactions I have against this idea of equity, which is when you try to pursue equality of outcome, you can't also at the same time pursue equality of opportunity. They cut against each other. So I'm looking at the strategic planning at Winston-Salem State University. So that's, in North Carolina. So this is a public university, and they're working towards equity statement.
Oh gosh.
This is what they say. This is their words, and they think this is actually a good thing. But here's what they say. The terms equality and equity are often used interchangeably. However, they differ in important ways. Equality is typically defined as treating everyone the same and giving everyone access to the same opportunities. Meanwhile, equity refers to proportional representation by race, class, gender in those same opportunities. To achieve equity, policies and procedures may result in an unequal distribution of resources. For example, need-based financial aid reserves money specifically for low-income students. So, and then it goes on to talk about why this is so great, why this is so important, et cetera, et cetera. But that's what they admit, that to achieve equity, you actually have to pursue inequality.
Yep.
It's not saying, okay, we've got all these resources that are available to everyone. We're saying, no. You can have in this case, you can have two people of different races who have the same merit, and we're going to give to one but not the other based on their race, right? This is the whole Harvard lawsuit thing that's happening right now.
Yeah. Is that the one with the Asian students?
Yeah, right. It's discrimination against Asian students because they want Harvard to be
more diverse,
proportionally represented, which means that Asians can only make up, what is it, 5% or 8% of the group, even though you have these students who are Asian who their scores are way better.
Yes.
So one point to be made, and this is what you're getting at with the kulaks and with things that we've seen throughout history, is when you try to pursue equality of outcome, you necessarily take away equality of opportunity.
For some. Yep.
For some.
And I don't want to dig into this too much, but the foundational principle underlying that is that resources are scarce. We can't create them out of nothing. And so they have to be allocated. And so when you decide that you want to give equal outcomes to one student, or one person or one entity, you have to necessarily take away resources from someone else or the opportunities from someone else. But yeah, that if you dig back far enough, it's all a matter of scarcity, and the idea that we can't create out of nothing, like God did. But,
exactly. And so I've seen this, even just on a practical level. One of the ways this equality of opportunity would really hurt everybody in society is with education. So, there's been this push for free education, universal access to college. Well, I'm thinking about the University of Tennessee, which I thought about going to because I grew up in Tennessee. It used to be that pretty much if you lived in Tennessee, you could go to the University of Tennessee. You'd get accepted and it would be pretty cheap. But then over time, Tennessee wanted to become a more highly ranked, more highly prestigious university, where actually a degree from there would give you a leg up. Well, the only way to do that was to limit the kinds of people who could go to the school. So then their average, ACT score went from like a 21 up to a 26, and the price of it went up, and it became something where, oh, if you graduated from the University of Tennessee, that means that you're probably a better person to employ than if you graduated from this community college, for example, right? Well, if you suddenly make colleges free, and you try to make sure that that everybody can get in, at least proportional to the population or whatever, then how is an employer going to know whether your degree from that university means that you're worth employing,
or means anything at all?
Means anything at all. So suddenly, great, everybody gets these degrees from all these universities, and it doesn't really distinguish them at all from anybody else.
Right.
And so then an employer is going to have to pick some other criteria to hire you. And suddenly,
which would be a good thing, in my opinion.
Which would be a good thing. It would be a good thing. But suddenly, all that money that the government spent to give you free education was just them paying for you to hang out for 4 years, getting a degree that wouldn't matter. So the argument is, oh, if everyone got free education, then everyone would get better jobs. And in reality, it's like, no, if you make it free for everybody and everybody has equal access to all the universities, then it's not going to be a criteria that's going to be used when you're hired.
The college degree has been diluted and doesn't mean anything.
Right.
And I think that is, we're going to have a discussion later about college, but that's huge. When you pursue this idea that everyone needs to have the same outcomes, and you decide that everyone has a right to free college, you're going to dilute what it means to have a college degree. And the college degree is being diluted in other ways as well, but that's a big one. That's a big one.
It really is.
So let's give some examples. I have a few examples that I want to kind of highlight. And when we talk about equity or the equality of outcome, there's two kind of categories in my mind. One is the idea of representation, and the other is like income or like resource allocation. Representation is a big one now, because you're seeing all of these different initiatives pop up, especially in like Hollywood and in academia, about equal representation. Like you were saying with the Harvard lawsuit. Everyone wants the popular demographics of the United States to be represented in their own microcosm of their field, of whatever field they're in. So the population demographics and ratios of the whole United States needs to be proportionally represented in every college across the United States, or it needs to be represented in every field of expertise, right? But what that does is it focuses on one variable and it disregards all other variables that may play into the decisions that people make to go into those areas, right? So, for instance, Thomas Sowell was talking about a study that was done where it was so in the United States, African American median age is 26, Asian American median age is 50. Why would we expect an equal representation in Asians in the NBA? Right. If that's the demographics, why would we expect 15%? Like, and if you add white people into this too, why would we expect whatever Caucasians make up 60 something percent or whatever, African Americans make up what, 15 something like that, or
I think it's about 18%. Yeah.
18. Do we really think that should be the overall representation? Why do we expect that? We don't, because we know there are different variables that play into all of this. Biology, culture. I will never have the same. Well, first of all, I'll never have the same opportunities to make it to the NBA as someone like LeBron James. But that I didn't grow up in a society, or I didn't grow up in a culture where basketball was a huge thing. Like, I've never been super into basketball. So I mean, that's just one way of just saying that there's lots of different variables that bake into this thing. But what we do is we see the unequal outcome in that field, and we say discrimination or some sort of disparity is a moral failing or whatever. Another one of these is I think California they have a rule now that any publicly traded organization, I guess, chartered in California, has to have at least one woman on the board of directors. And so, because that's kind of something that people have seen as, like, there's women aren't getting these positions because there's discrimination or whatever. I don't think that's the case. You're not taking into consideration the roles that women want to take, all of these different things that don't necessarily play into that kind of decision.
Right. Well, yeah. Actually, in that kind of now famous interview that Jordan Peterson had, he brought that up, that like the corporate world is not a type of atmosphere that, on the whole, most women want to be involved in. It's extremely competitive. It demands all your time, and it means that you can't have a family. And so some women want to pursue that, and they're good at it, and they do get hired, and they do get on board of directors, and they do become CEOs. But disproportionately, more men desire that kind of job than women do. So why would you force there to have to be women in these certain key positions if there are just a lot of women who don't want that?
Right.
And that goes for a lot of things. I mean, women disproportionately make up the medical profession, and men disproportionately make up the engineering profession. And that's just by choice. It's not like, I mean, how could you even argue that that's because of some systemic problem? Like,
right.
Well, engineers are all sexist or something. I mean, it's just that's just what people choose.
Yeah, and if you think about it, if California wants at least one woman on the board of directors, well, largely the population, United States population, is split 50-50, men and women. So are you saying you're allowing some discrimination by not making it 50-50? Like, if you just want one, why don't you go the full way and make it representative of the population?
Right. Well, and of course you don't want to be that woman, right?
Right.
Oh, you hired me just because I'm a woman, not because I'm qualified, right? I mean, it's like, I don't even think women want that.
But I mean, it's the same thing with the college thing. You've diluted what it means to actually get on the board as a woman in California, right? You didn't. I mean, there's that thing in the back of people's mind that's going to be like, well, she didn't really earn it. I mean, they needed it So
Yeah.
they dropped some of the barriers and kind of put her in this position because they needed to for legal purposes.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I was in college, we would have intramurals, co-ed intramural sports, and there was always this like, you always have to have at least 2 girls on the field at all times. And
Okay.
I was like, I wonder how these girls feel about that. Like, hey, join our team because we need a girl, right? Like, like,
Yeah.
and we'll try to do our best. It's just kind of like, I don't think that really made girls feel that great. And now you just kind of explode that when you put it in the corporate level.
Right. And it, man, is it making its way into the corporate arena? I work for a pretty big corporation, and it's a pension. Part of my company's business is a pension fund, and I do internal audit stuff. And so we were doing an audit over the pension valuation or pension reserve valuation processes. And ever since Dodd-Frank, after the financial crisis, Dodd-Frank came out and saw all these different rules for financial organizations and how they can operate and all of this stuff. But there are rules on how much you have to reserve for different, for men and women in the rules. And so for men, you have to reserve a little bit more. For women, you don't have to reserve as much. And the idea is that men are more risky. They just statistically are more risky human beings than women. Okay, so it's a statistical thing. Without getting into too many details, there was a situation where someone was getting kind of upset about that because they were saying that it was discrimination. They weren't saying it, but they were making it very known that was what was going through their mind. I'm like, no, listen. It's just statistical. I personally think it's theological. Men and women are different. We are made differently. We make different decisions. We take on different risks. Just the way that God made us. But it shows up in the statistics, and then you get kind of this backlash. It's like, hold on a second, why aren't we all equal?
Right. Yeah. It's just, I mean, imagine a society where there were quotas, where each position had to meet a certain quota for men and women, or for Black and Asian and Caucasian and Latino. And it's like, suddenly you get all of the stuff that people were trying to get out of in the 20th century, which was this idea that you don't get to choose what you do. Somebody chooses it for you. Either you just do what your dad did, or you do what women are supposed to do, et cetera, et cetera. You basically get that again, right? It's like, oh, well, you probably shouldn't go into the medical field because there are already enough women in the medical field. So you need to choose a different profession, right? Because you're not going to get hired. You probably, I know you really want to be an engineer and you'd be a really good one, but there are already a bunch of men in the engineering field, and they're only going to hire women now. So go,
That's interesting. That's an interesting way to think about it. What if you were like going through a really long schooling process like medical, and when you went in, it was like there's a deficiency of your gender. And so you're like, yes, but by the time you got there, it was already filled up, and you're like, dang it.
Dang it, yeah. I gotta pick something else. Yeah, and it's like,
I gotta go back to school.
Yeah, or I mean, imagine, and I think sports, you brought up sports, and I think sports is a great example of how we all intuitively know that life is more about, life makes more sense when it's a meritocracy. So in sports, everybody agrees that you pick the most skilled players to be on your team, right? It doesn't matter what their race is. And it really doesn't matter what their gender is, too. Like, honestly, if there were, the thing is, unfortunate for people who want to say that men and women are equal, or not equal, but the same. Sports, obviously, there's not going to be a woman who's going to be able to get into the NBA just biologically. It's not going to work. But we all know that, like, if there was someone who was that good, no one would have a problem with her being in the NBA.
Right.
But in the NBA, you know, obviously it's disproportionately black. It's like 70% black. And nobody has a problem with that because everybody knows that these are the best players, you know?
Yeah.
There was a problem when it was disproportionately white, and everybody knew that there were these black players who were really good at basketball who weren't able to play.
Yeah.
Right. So sports kind of shows you that what makes the most sense is the people who are the best at what they do get the job.
Yep.
And why wouldn't we want that for education? Why wouldn't we want that for other jobs?
Yeah.
You want it to be on you. I think this comes down to, you want it to be your responsibility. If you go to medical school, you want it to be in your hands. If I study well, if I become a good doctor, I will get hired. And you don't want it to be about your gender or your sexual orientation or your religious preferences or anything else. You want it to be about your skills.
Yep.
Because then it's up to you. And if you don't get in, then, you know, if you don't get hired, then you do something else and you learn your lesson, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. And yeah. And I think the whole idea of representation is just a big one right now. You see it. I mean, there's this weird discussion going on about how certain demographics are represented in the amount of COVID deaths. And it's like, wow, like, are we going to go down the path of insinuating that they're like this medical situation that we're in, or this virus situation that we're in, is discriminatory? Like that
Right,
one,
it's
that
weird.
one just that boggles me. But there's another key area is Hollywood. Hollywood is all on the quotas right now, diversity quotas. And okay, just as an FYI, I was flipping through Netflix the other night, and we're trying to look for Christmas movies to watch.
Yeah.
2 in the past 2 days. They looked pretty good. Both of them, the key component is a homosexual situation, homosexual character, right? And I don't know. You see it in all of these different areas. I think it's the Emmys that is bumping up their equity or the diversity requirements in movies. I think is Emmys movies. What's movies? Oscars.
No,
I don't know.
Oscars. Emmys is for television shows. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, by the way, did you see that about Andrew Cuomo?
No.
He got an Emmy. I think it was
Andrew Cuomo?
Or wait, which Cuomo brother is the governor?
Yeah.
Is that Andrew?
Yeah.
Yeah. He got an Emmy for the way that he used TV and advertising for the COVID stuff. Anyways,
wow.
go and read about that. It's really weird. But yeah, diversity boards, representation, huge thing. The other thing that I just want to briefly talk about is the income and resources.
Yes.
That's another area that is a huge thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, right before we get into that, one last thing on the proportional stuff. Equity being proportional representation. So I don't remember if I've mentioned this on the show before, but there's a discussion that Thomas Sowell had on this, and he talked about how when he was teaching in the Ivy Leagues, there were a bunch of black students who were dropping out or getting really bad grades in his classes. And so he did some investigating and tried to figure out why. And what had happened was that they were trying to hit these quotas of a certain amount of black students. So they were pulling from black students who had really good SAT scores in terms of the entire population. They were like in the 75th percentile in terms of the population. But the problem was everybody else in the class was in the 99th percentile. So compared to everybody else in the class, they were at the bottom. but compared to the general population, they were near the top. And he said this was ruining these kids' like future prospects, because they could have gone to any number of good schools and been at the top of their class and had plenty of opportunities after graduating to get a good job and make a good living. But instead, they get into an Ivy League school and they're at the bottom of the class, or they drop out, and they actually end up not being able to succeed because they were picked to go to these elite schools simply because of the proportional quotas that needed to be met.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Thomas Sowell is a black man. He's an economist, very intelligent guy. So he's not, I mean, him saying this is not like in any way discriminatory. He's not saying that black people just can't, are not as smart or anything like that. He's just saying that the mechanism that they've used to determine who gets into these schools is not based on a criteria that lends itself to success. It's just your diversity quota.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, is that we need to keep in mind that even the people that are supposed to be helped by equality of outcome and equity, their outcome might end up being worse, because it's not the way life works.
Yeah.
And because we all live in little subcultures and sub-societies, what really matters is how do you match up against those people in your little sub-society. So if you're 75th percentile in the US, then you want to go to a school with other people around that margin and try to be near the top. And then in your sub-society, you're near the top and you get a good job. You don't want to go to a sub-society where everybody's at the 99th percentile and you're at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My brother made this, I think, strategic choice. He got into the University of Chicago Law School, which is one of the best law schools in the country.
Yep.
He also
Which is
got
where
into the
Thomas
University.
Sowell went, right?
I think so, yeah. But he also got into the University of Tennessee Law School, and he chose to go to UT because he knew that if he went to UT, he would be at the top of his class, and if he wanted to get a job doing law in Tennessee, he'd be able to get any job he wanted, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
If he went to Chicago, he'd be middle of the pack, or maybe near the bottom, depending. And then he'd be competing for jobs with a bunch of other people who were at top law schools who were top of their class, and he wouldn't get any job, or he wouldn't get the job that he wanted. Mm-hmm. So he went to UT. He was at the top of his class, and he got a job right out of law school. Actually, he got 2 jobs right out of law school. So that's the type of thing that equality of opportunity gives you. That's not the type of thing that equality of outcome gives you.
Right. Yeah, and so I mean, you see it in this representation idea, but you also see it in the income or like resource allocation kind of framework. One of the things, and I'm going to get in trouble, the gender wage gap. Is there a gender wage gap? Yes, there is. Is it indicative of discrimination? No. I think the statistics right now are 78% on the dollar or something like that that women earn versus others. But the calculation is based on the population, based on the strict demographics, and it doesn't take into consideration the choices that we've kind of already discussed this in the episode. But there's so many variables that go into who takes what positions, who, what decisions people make career-wise. So many different factors that play into this that mm-hmm. do not make this a discrimination thing. And
right.
Yeah. And so I don't even know where I want to go with this. This is a landmine. I mean, a minefield.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but I think everyone should be able to agree that that we have to calculate, or you have to factor into these statistics, the personal choices that people make, and not assume that everyone wants to make the same choice.
Right.
So, for example, my wife, she wants to be a mom at some point and primarily stay at home with the kids and maybe work part-time, but she would prefer to be at home with the kids more than working full-time. So right now, since we don't have kids, she has a job, but she's chosen a job that she likes and she's suited for, but she can easily leave. It's not one of those jobs where you've got to invest 10, 15 years of your life to rise to the top sort of job, because she knows that in a couple of years we want to have kids and she doesn't want to be there anymore.
Right.
So not only is she skewing the numbers, so to speak, because she's probably going to drop out of the workforce, but she's also skewing the numbers because she's making a choice now to have a type of job that isn't going to pay as much, because she wants a job that she can leave really easily, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's where a lot of women are, is that they don't want a job that they have to commit their whole life to try to work to the top. They want a job that they can leave and have a family. Or when they have a family, they want a job where they can be flexible, where they can still be a mom and also work some, but not have to work all the time.
Yep.
And that's just choices that they make. It's not, no one's making that choice for them. They're just making it because that's going to lead to a happier life.
Yep. I think there was I don't know if it was Milton Friedman or if it was Thomas Sowell that laid this kind of idea out. I think it was a study that was done where women tend to take positions that are less risky, are more stable, and don't have a whole bunch of obsolescence. So, like for instance, you will see a woman taking a teacher's job more proportionally. Women will take teachers' jobs because if you drop out of the workforce for a year, you come back and you can pick right back up where you left off.
Right.
Whereas something with like a tech field or something that's more risky or has more technological change or anything like that, where if you drop out for a year to spend time with your children, you come back and your experience is obsolete.
Yes.
You've basically disqualified yourself by taking the time off because of the rapid change. And I think that's what we see. We see a big push to get women into the STEM fields, which is a good thing. I mean, yeah, sure, let's do it. But we're pushing it past the boundaries of reality and the decisions and the just the way that men and women differ in their views about how their careers should go. Like we're kind of disregarding the reality of that. And again, I know I say this a lot, but this is deeply theological. It's a theological thing. Men and women are different. Wow.
Yeah.
They're different. They are different. It's not to say they're not equal. They're just not exactly the same.
Right. And we need to, as Christians, we really need to push this idea that you don't judge the value of work simply based on how much you make from it, right? So, like, it's true. Women often choose jobs that pay less, like being a teacher or being a nurse, as opposed to being a doctor or being, a CEO or something, high up in a business world. But are we going to say that teachers and nurses are less valuable than, computer analysts? Like, no, we're not. And often the jobs that are most valuable to society pay less. That's just kind of how it works, right? And so, yes, we can have another discussion about whether or not we need to pay teachers more. But if women feel more naturally bent toward helping children learn, or taking care of the elderly and the weak, or nursing, those are amazing jobs, and those are wonderful things that they're doing. Yes, they don't get paid as much, but that's not what makes their work valuable.
Right. I agree. Yes, love it. another little statistic that I wanted to call out, and I think this actually might speak more to equal opportunity, but there's a statistic that people who live in mountainous regions just across the world have less income and less education. I think 8% of the world's land is in a temperate coastal area where 23% of the people live, and they produce 53% of the world's output. Coastal temperate areas produce 53% of the outcome, 23% of the people, and it's only 8% of the land. But people in mountainous regions, no matter where you are on the globe, earn less than people on the coast. And I think there's a lot of like historical kind of things that play into that. Like, you know, as society's developing, obviously the coastal areas, port areas are going to develop quicker than mountainous areas just because of the way resources flow into a society and all of that. But I mean, if we just take those statistics at face value, discrimination, right? I mean, discrimination, there's disparity there. There's a moral failing. Let's fix it. Where, okay, yeah, let's try to address it, but realize that just by putting these quotas or income, you know, guide, I don't know what word I'm looking for. Just these like income prerequisites or goals that need to be reached for these different demographics. That's not going to help. That's not going to help anything.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've said a lot, but I think the key takeaway is that, or one of the key takeaways is equality of outcome is not a worthy goal, disregarding all of other variables that play into all these different aspects of the marketplace. You can't just put a quota of a representation quota or a income requirement on, you know, the outcomes across all these different peoples and expect that society is going to do well. Yeah, I think that's just kind of the overarching idea in my mind.
Yeah. And I think what I'd say to kind of wrap up what we're saying is that equality of opportunity allows for personal choice. And that's what we really need to emphasize, is personal choice. I am finishing up my third master's degree, and I'm a college professor, and I make less money than or an electrician.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. Like, I know that I could become a plumber or electrician and make more money, but I don't want to do that. And the fact is, the plumber who laid the pipes for my house and the electrician who did the electrical for my house, if they were given the opportunity to be a college professor, they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's fine. We don't need to only look at income to be able to determine whether or not somebody is has the opportunities that they want.
Yep. Agreed. And I think I guess the Bible verse or the passage that sticks in my head is the John 9 passage where the disciples asked Jesus about this blind man, and they said, who sinned that this man was born blind, his parents or him? And Jesus said, no, it's not that he sinned. It's that God's work would be glorified in his life. And I think there's a really good principle there, is that whenever we're talking about our situation in life and how it's unfair how we were born, or the opportunities that have been kind of given to us or presented to us, just realize that there's a plan. God has a purpose for your life. And I don't want to get too like prosperity gospel-y, but there is a purpose for your life. And it's going to be to glorify God. No matter what situation, no matter your station, where you are, where you started out, God will be glorified in your life, in however you take that that position. Whether you're born homeless and you stay homeless just because that's what you want. I don't know if anyone wants that, but or if you were born homeless and you ultimately make it up to be CEO of the biggest corporation in the world, God's going to be glorified in your life. And so I think let's think about that. No matter what your situation is, think, okay, God, what am I supposed to be doing? How do I glorify you in my situation, in my life, in my career, in the way that I direct my life? No matter where I am, no matter where I start out and what opportunities are available to me, how do I glorify you? Because not everyone's not everyone's going to start out the same place. Not everyone's going to end up in the same place. Yeah. So.
Amen.
Whew, we talked about a lot.
We did.
A ton.
That was interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I hope I don't get any emails for this one. I feel like this is a parts of this are a minefield. So we'll see. All right. Any last thoughts, Nathan?
I think you wrapped it up well.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we're going to be talking about maybe the next episode or episode or two from now, prices. If that doesn't sound riveting, well, tune in because it will be. All right. All right, everybody. Go love God, love neighbor, and build something. Talk to you later.